In today's show, the Blazers do what they do. They just keep winning. They beat the Sixers in Philly. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your Bass First point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking about a 119-102 win in Philly to secure a winning road trip. 7 games on the road. The Blazers, the worst they can be is 4-3. This team just keeps doing what they do and winning basketball games, and they go play a bad and shorthanded Philly team, and they take care of business. We'll talk about that game. Some good performances from Anthony Simons. I thought Donovan Clingan had a nice response after a bumpy first half. Shaedon Sharpe played well. The Blazers continue to kind of find their magic a little bit in just not having to rely on one singular player to score their points. We'll get into all of that. And plus, I think it's time to just embrace the wins. It's time. It's time to just celebrate the wins. I believe, in my opinion, this Philly game was crossing the Rubicon. We are now on the other side. At this point, you might as well hope that they make a postseason push, albeit challenging. We'll talk about that to close the show. Let's first do what we do, though. Your fastest recap in the West. Blazers win in Philadelphia, 119-112. Still no Jeremy Grant in this game. The other injuries, Rob Williams and DeAndre Ayton, along with Matisse Thybulle, are still out. But no Jeremy Grant who missed this game. So the Blazers are still a little bit shorthanded, albeit some of these injuries are a little bit longer term. But more importantly, the second night of a back-to-back on the road in a new city after an overtime game against Cleveland. Now, it wasn't a super late game. It was a 3:30 tip-off in Cleveland, so it's not like they played these games it ended like 22 hours before tip-off, and you still had to do a little bit of traveling, albeit Cleveland and Philly aren't crazy far apart. But it's a little bit of you certainly have to get on a plane and go places. But like this was when we were sort of previewing this road trip. Is like Philly's a bad team. They're even worse. They're even worse off than when the road trip started because no Joel Embiid, Paul George didn't play in this game. Tyrese Maxey got injured in the third quarter. But playing one of the bad teams on this trip on the second night of a back-to-back is just going to be more challenging than you might like. At least if you were going to pick like, hey, if you're going to have a second night of a back-to-back, how about it just be against the Celtics, a team you're unlikely to beat anyways? Just make it more challenging. Don't make an easier opponent a more challenging game if you could really have your druthers in the schedule choosing. That's not how schedules work. You just play the game that's in front of you, and the Blazers did. They're down 32-29 after one, but the Philly led early by double digits, and the Blazers came back in the first quarter. Philly led by as many as 12 in the second quarter and went into the break up 61-56 behind a pretty monster first half from Andre Drummond. I guess he's been dealing with a big toe injury, and he's finally healthy from this, but when I have watched Philly this year without Joel Embiid, I have been very underwhelmed by Andre Drummond. I'm like, you know what? One of the all-time great rebounders, like a stat monster, a legend in the box score, but like he doesn't have it anymore. He had it in the first half, 16-11, a couple assists. I thought he just overpowered and out-athleted Donovan Clingan. Like I thought he beat him by being stronger and by being quicker. And it's like, yeah, dude was drafted in 2012. This is year 14 for him, and he's out-quicking and out-monstering or out-muscling. Excuse me, a 20-year-old rookie, 21-year-old rookie. Donovan Clingan recently celebrated his birthday. Blazers are down 5 at the break. They were dogs in this game. I've told you in the past I'm not a big betting line guy. It's not really how I pay attention to games before they start, but I was curious on this one. Second night of a back-to-back. Philly is straight up bad, and they're down Paul George. It was prior to the Paul George being officially ruled out that Philly was favored by as many as 4 points. I believe it's 3.5 to 4.5, depending on when you looked at the line. Right at tip-off, it dropped down to 1.5, but Philly was still favored in this game. I can't believe that. And yet, 5-point Sixers edge at halftime. First 4 minutes of the third quarter, the Blazers flip the script. They flip the switch. They flip whatever you want. They do a kick flip. It was over. They just took control of the game. Anthony Simons, who would finish with 34 points, scored 12 points in less than 4 minutes to open the second half. Okay. It's on. A three, a steal and a leak out, another jumper, another three. Yeah, he was hooping. All of a sudden, the Blazers have taken control of the lead, and the Sixers, for the remainder of the game, will never get closer than 8. Now, Portland didn't really blow this team out until the end of the game. The Philly kind of hung around in the 8 to 14 range, but the Blazers seized control right out of halftime and never gave it back. They're up 91-81 after 3, a 35-20 third quarter. Held Philly to just 20 points. During that third quarter, Tyrese Maxey on a drive baseline ran into Donovan Clingan. No foul called. Clingan goes vertical and contests. He's a giant person. Maxey hits Clingan and falls to the floor hard. He did not return with what the Sixers called a back contusion. He remained on the court for an extended period of time. So now, no Joel Embiid, who's out for the year. No Paul George, who's Vidal Sassoon. No Tyrese Maxey, who has to leave the game. This team is just super shorthanded. They're missing some other folks along the way too. Like if you want to call Eric Gordon like someone they're missing. Quentin Grimes just had 44 and they beat Golden State, but this is not a good team. And they're shorthanded, and Maxey was struggling because he's actually been struggling of late, and Tumani Kamara put him in the straitjacket, and all of a sudden it's like 10-point game heading in the fourth quarter, and Philly never really made it a game late. The Blazers eventually even emptied their bench over the final minute and 20 seconds after a late injury to Justin Edwards, and Portland goes on to win 119-102. That's your fastest recap in the West. Anthony Simons is the reason that they won this game on offense. He finished with 34 points, hit 6 of 11 three-pointers, the fifth 30-point game of the year for Simons. He hadn't had a really loud game in a minute offensively. This is kind of what they needed. Shaedon Sharpe had 20 in a starting role. I thought Sharpe had a couple really nice buckets down the stretch to be like, yeah, for sure, we're not going to lose. Duop Reith finished with 13 off the bench. He played 18 minutes off the bench as the Blazers' backup center. Reith hit 3 threes, a bunch of them wide open, but that stretchy 5 ability that he brings is really useful. I thought he was really good in this game. I want to talk more about Clingan and Ant in the second segment specifically, I thought Clingan had a really bumpy first half and then kind of ended up, particularly the box score suggested he was just straight up good. But I think the second half he was just a lot better in a variety of ways. Let's talk about Ant. Let's talk about Clingan. Let's talk about the Blazers' secret sauce in the second segment. This is what they do. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, let's talk DoorDash. You know DoorDash. They're going to bring you food to your house or whatever else you might need, but now they got a deal for NBA fans. When players swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in an NBA game this season, you can score a huge deal the next day. If you are an active Dash Pass member during this NBA regular season, when a player scores 50 or more points, you can get up to 50% off an order, and you can get 50% off an order, and that's up to $10 on any order the next day from noon to midnight if you're an East Coast listener, or for my West Coast listeners, 9 a.m. to 11:59 Pacific time. We got all day with this DoorDash deal. So say you're watching a game and then you get a late night craving after a 50-piece. Well, you want to buy 50-piece wings? You can use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Or say after a 50-point game, you're at work the next day and you just need to grab something quick and easy for lunch brought right to your desk. Well, with Dash Pass, you can get your favorite meals with $0 in delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus now, You save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more points in an NBA game, Dash Pass members get 50% off on an order the next day, up to $10. Just use the promo code NBA50 and you'll get that discount on eligible orders at participating merchants. You must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right. So Anthony Simons was really good in this game. And this is not going to be a segment where we celebrate the greatness of Anthony Simons. What I want to celebrate is that, quite frankly, Deni Avdija didn't have it in this game. And Deni Avdija coming off a 30-point triple-double in his last game. It's like he was absolutely hooping, and 30 points, 30, 12, and 10 in a win over the Cavs, right? And Avdija was like, they were running offense through him, and he was putting the cape on, right? That he was their hero in that game, and they aren't close in that game without how awesome Deni was, right? He got to the line, he made shots, all the things. It's like, he's awesome. He was not good. He was not good against the Sixers. He had 9 points on 3 of 14. He even got to the free throw line and missed free throws, something that Deni didn't do against the Cavs at all. He was 3 of 6 at the free throw line. Just a bad Deni night, right? And in some other instances, Deni, who's probably been the Blazers' best player this season, and for my money, certainly the best player this season, it's like in other iterations of this team, perhaps, when Deni has a stinker, it's over, right? When your best player has a stinker, it's like, hey, we tried our best. But the Blazers' secret sauce over this stretch, they're now 15-6 in their last 21 games. They're 9-0 during that stretch against teams that are under 500 on the day of the game. They just take care of business, right? This is another game against a team that is below 500. That the Blazers, I don't know why they were dogs in this game. That's so bizarre to me. But they, I was very confident they would win this game because they've been playing well. Obviously, the first half maybe tested my confidence, but it's like the Blazers have been competent and effective and better than the bad teams for over a month. They've just been like a fun, competent basketball team, and Philly is anything but competent, and the Blazers took advantage of them. But the secret sauce during the stretch, when they haven't had any flubs, right, when they play teams below 500, now 9-0 against teams under 500 on day of the game since January 19th, they continue to roll against bad teams. They are better than the bad teams. The secret sauce has been that they aren't singularly reliant on one scorer. So when Deni had 30 the other nights, Anthony Simons steps up and has 34. Their offense isn't like this amazing egalitarian, perfect, 2014 Spurs thing where the ball whips around and anyone can score. Do you believe the beautiful game? But it is an offense where they have a lot of guys who can create a little bit. And so they can run pick and rolls with Deni and bring Ants off the ball. They can run pick and rolls with Ants and have Deni as a cutter out of the angles and the corner and the corners. They can have Shaedon Sharpe be an initiator. They can run they run this action where like Donovan Clingan gets it at the top of the key and he either runs a dribble handoff or he screens away for someone to set up a little action with them moving to the middle. Like they allow some different ways to get their somewhat limited creators going, but they have enough. It's like it can be Sharpe one night, it can be Deni one night, it can be Anthony Simons one night. When Jeremy Grant was healthy, it could be him a little bit. Tumani's had some games, Scoots had some games. When DA was healthy, he was having some games, right? Like their secret sauce during this stretch is that they are not singularly reliant on one player to provide all of the offense, and they have a baseline of competent defense, and they have enough guys who can say, "Hey, I can do it tonight," that it works. And Simons was that guy. He had 14 in that third quarter, but 12 in the opening 4 minutes of the third quarter. That totally flipped the game. The Blazers took control and they never gave it back. And he came out of the third quarter super hot, and that was why they took control. And Philly, obviously, they lose Maxey. It's like they just don't have the type of sustainable offense. I mean, Quinn Grimes did have 44 in the prior game, but it's like they don't have the type of sustainable, and Grimes was not good shooting the ball in this game. They don't have the type of sustainable offensive firepower to be like, okay, we're down 12, make the charge, right? Like once the Blazers kind of took control, had that double-digit lead, it felt like they were going to, if they just didn't have a real stinker, we're going to win the game. No stinkers. A 35-20 third quarter flipped the script, and Anthony Simons was continued the trend for the Blazers where when they are playing their best, when it's humming, it can be a different guy every night. I also want to talk about Clingan briefly here. I thought Donovan Clingan kind of got punked in the first half. Andre Drummond is amazingly not old because he was drafted as a teenager, but like he's been in the league a long time. He's the 2012 draft with Dame and Myers Leonard. But I know that because the Blazers really wanted Andre Drummond and he went earlier and they ended up with Myers Leonard. But in any case, I've watched the Sixers a handful of times this year. But you know, I've probably seen more of them as a bad team than I should have. And when I've watched Drummond play this season, I have been deeply underwhelmed by his impact on the game now. And then the first half against the Blazers, he had 16 and 11 and 2 dimes. I thought he just took it to Klingon. I thought he took it to him. I thought he was stronger than him. I thought he was quicker than him. I thought he was just better than him. And basketball isn't as simple as your individual matchup, but I thought Drummond dominated his individual matchup. Klingon had a bunch of rebounds in the first half because he was missing some putbacks. He was kept getting the ball, getting his shots inside and not finishing. But like, I think after halftime, Klingon obviously came out with the juice. He tried a huge dunk, which he doesn't always do because he's not much of a leaper in the third quarter. Didn't finish, but it was like clearly came out with the juice. And I thought he just came out so much more aggressive against Drummond, who after 16-11 in the first half, you know, he still had, because he's a beast, had 9 and 7 in the second half, but he wasn't nearly as positively impactful. He wasn't just like getting to the glass. He wasn't hitting those little baby jump hooks with his right hand off of pick and rolls or off of like hiding in the dunker spot. I thought Klingon played with a lot more juice. Sort of some of my read on Klingon's game in this specific game was that he fouled out in 11 minutes against the Cavs, and he's like, I'm not going to foul out in this game. This is a game where I'm going to participate, I'm going to play. And so he didn't play with like, you don't want to foul out in 11 minutes, but Klingon is allowed to use fouls. People point to like the average is, 6.5 fouls per 36. He ain't playing no 36 minutes. That doesn't matter. Like he can pick up fouls. Like he can pick 4 and 5 fouls in a game. It doesn't matter. He just can't eliminate himself from the game in less than 11 minutes. He picked up 4 fouls in the first half against Cleveland, but he can commit 2 fouls a half. That's fine. He just needs to play. He needs to play and he needs to be there. And I thought a little bit watching this first half, it's like, yeah, I think teams have they've scouted Klingon now. They know what he is. Against certain matchups, Klingon is still awesome on defense. I think he's really good defensive instincts and good defensive impacts, but he's not such a versatile defender that he can do it in a million different ways, right? Like he does what he does. He's a big person who plays who, if you can get him in drop coverage, he can stay around the rim. He can be really good. Sometimes he can get caught in between guarding pick and rolls and get beat on lob plays, which he did in the first half. He's not great guarding the perimeter, but like when he plays what he plays to his strengths are strong, which is a good sign for a young big man, right? Because he's still learning the ropes. And it felt like in this game and in the Cavs game, it's like teams are just kind of figuring out what he can't do. And what happens often with young players in the league, or even just players who are role-y type players. Young players, maybe it's more pronounced, but some players, I think this happened a little bit to some extent with Duop Reith during the season where he was a long-term starter last year. It's like once you get overextended, your warts start to show up more regularly. Like if you're pretty good in an 18-minute role and they ask you to play a 28-minute role, well, the things you do bad show up and are more pronounced and more loud and more obvious and all of those things. And I think that was kind of happening with Klingon a little bit. And then I thought he locked in, played focused, played hard, and ended up with a really solid second half. I think he responded very well, whether he was specifically challenged by the coaching staff or he just said, hey, I don't want to go out like that. He finished with 13-13 and 3 blocks. And I just think like even without looking at the box score first half to second half, he just played the second half. Klingon didn't get exposed. You never felt like, yeah, they're getting to him again. He didn't feel like that. I thought he had a really nice response, and you want to see that from young players, right? They're going to be imperfect in a lot of ways. I feel like we've seen that from Scoot Henderson sometimes this year, where it's just like, yeah, Scoot's not playing well, but he sticks with it and makes some really nice reads. And it's like, yeah, do what you do best. Do what you like. For Scoot, it's making plays, rather pick and roll. For Klingon, it's like being a big physical presence on defense, and I thought he was much better in the second half and responded. The Blazers also won this game going away in a way that was very predictable because this is what they do. They've been competent for like a month. They're 15-6 in their last 21 games. If they play a team that's worse than them, it seems like they're just going to take care of business. Now, they close this road trip, Boston and Oklahoma City. They've got some really big tests, and if they win those games, boy, will we talk about something different on this particular program. But I think this win against Philly was crossing the Rubicon. Alia Octa-S. This die is cast, y'all. Shout out to my nerds. I think it's okay if they win now. I think we've gone the other way, where it's probably in your best emotional interest to say, let's get some dubs, because they're in a weird spot, and at this point, winning is just more rewarding. Let's talk about where they find themselves after 6 weeks of competence. Join me in the third segment, won't ya? First, though, let's talk about OpenPhone. If you run a small business, you got a lot of things to juggle. Your personal phone can become your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day and nights. And as your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your small business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone, and it integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also is going to bring you call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of all your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customers, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. And right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/lockedonNBA. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/lockedonNBA. For 20% off 6 months, openphone.com/lockedonNBA. If you have an existing number with another service, OpenPhone will happily port them over at no extra charge. Still a pass first point guard, still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. The Blazers have been confident and downright decent for weeks. Basically over a month now of just being pretty darn solid. You could say they fattened up against a soft schedule and bad teams, but if you always take care of business against the bad teams, one, hard enough to do in the NBA as is, but it just proves that you're better than them. They're just a rung above the true bottom dwellers, and they have been for 6 weeks now. Since the calendar flipped truly to the second half of the season, from January 19th on, that was game 42 of an 82-game season, the true second half points, they've just been good. They've been better. They've hung with some decent teams. And even beaten some of them. And every time they play a bad team, they handle them. Taking care of business in and of itself is challenging in the NBA, and the Blazers have continued to do that. And they've done that with a baseline of competent defense, and they've done that with enough balanced scoring to find a way to get things done. They continue to do that against Philly. They've just raised their level of competence to a point where you think, hey, if they play a team that's no good, they're going to beat them because they're better than no good. And that puts them in a spot. And I believe beating Philly was officially crossing the Rubicon. The die is cast. I have been personally higher on the sort of pro-tanking scale of things. I have, spoken here about the importance of draft picks and yada, 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 and how there is no... the probability is the probability. You can talk about what happened to the Hawks last year, but the math doesn't care about what happened to the Hawks last year. The probability will be an individual event that happens at the draft lottery, and that losing, and unfortunately in the NBA, is the most pragmatic way to chase better picks. And the long history of the league, although I've had some pushback against listeners, but I would argue, look it up, suggests that the best players are found in the top of the draft, et cetera, et cetera. But that's over. Throw that out the window. It's time to enjoy the wins. The die is cast. They've crossed the Rubicon. They're marching into Rome. And by that, I mean they're just chasing the play-in. And while it is deeply unlikely they chase the play-in, it's deeply unlikely that they get much significantly improved draft odds because of their competency level, and they're not going to pull the plug, it appears. It seemed like they absolutely would, and now it seems like they absolutely are not going to, right? They're just going to play it out. When Joe Cronin says he's not going to take the opportunity away for his team to chase a play-in spot, it would be wrong to take it away from him. He was telling the truth, at least so far, and there's no reason to believe that that's going to change over the final 5 weeks of the regular season. So where are the Blazers? In the middle of sorts. After their win against the Sixers, they're 4 games out of 10th in the West with 20 to go. Now, some bad luck has befallen the Dallas Mavericks, some created by themselves. Do you know that you can create your own luck by a series of terrible decisions? Yes, indeed. And that has happened. But also Kyrie Irving got hurt his knee in their game last night. And so, like, certainly the Mavericks are in a space that looks like they could lose some games, right? They're already down Anthony Davis. They do not have Luka Doncic anymore by choice. They don't have Quentin Grimes anymore by choice, although I don't know that Grimes is the person who's going to change their fate. And now out Kyrie Irving, right? They're already a team that is somewhat reliant on stars with competent role players that complement those star skills, but aren't maybe best suited to step up into those spots necessarily. And the Mavs are hurt, but with 20 games left, the Blazers would have to win 5 more games than the Mavericks over this stretch to make the 10th seed in the play-in. That seems pretty unlikely. Even the beat-up Mavs. That seems like a very tall order. It is not off the table, which is why I say, when you're watching these games and you find yourself wanting to root for wins, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. I think there was a time to be pragmatic and think about, okay, if they could get some quality tank losses. I think they have gone too far to the other side, and at this point, for the self-preservation and the point, the need to be realistic about what is fun as a fan, stop fretting about the lottery. Start celebrating the wins, because they might not make the play-in. I don't think they will. I think it's hard. But certainly the Suns are a mess. The Mavericks are hurt. The Kings aren't very good. It is, and Domantas Sabonis got hurt for the Kings. There are some teams in front of them that are hurt. It's just you need those teams to really, really eat it, and you need the Blazers to, against a tough schedule in March, win beat some good teams along the way. It would take the Blazers, even if the Blazers go 12-8 in their final 20 games, they're going to need the Mavs to really be awful, right? They're going to need the Mavs to go 7-13 during that same stretch. Yeah, it's a lot. That's a big ask. And because if the Mavs tread water, or if they're slightly below, right? If they're 9-11 to get into the play-in, right? Then you're just probably not going to catch them without an excellent record. And I think more realistically, what you might be rooting for is the Cavs or the Mavs, are the priorities to change for them, is for them to realize that 10th doesn't do it for them. And they too would like to lose on purpose. And the Blazers winning on, remaining competitive and trying to win allows you to get there. And maybe that is the thing that tips the tide. But in general, I think the play-in is pretty hard to get to, but at this point, you might as well root for wins. You might as well root for wins because they're pretty far away from improving their lottery odds. As the Blazers sit here today, they're 10th. They have the 10th best lottery odds in the NBA. They're 4 games away from losses, this is in the loss column, away from the 8th best lottery odds. So to fall down in the lottery, they would have to also be really bad against teams like the Sixers, who are a mess and extremely injured and not incentivized in any way to win. So even catching the teams below you in the standings is impossible. They're 6 games from the 7th best lottery odds, which is where the Sixers stand today. That's why I think it's the Rubicon. If the Blazers had beaten or lost to the Sixers and you give Philly a win and you get a loss, then you can kind of look at the standings and say, maybe, right? Maybe you pull the plug. Maybe you say, okay, 7th actually is significantly improved odds over 10th. Maybe there's some math that says it's worth it. I don't think they can get to 7th. I think it's impossible. I think it's pretty hard to get to 10th place in the West. I think it's pretty hard to lose enough to get to 7th place in the lottery odds. The Blazers are just in the middle. They're in the middle. They're in the middle by choice. They're in the middle by competence. They're in the middle by growth of young players. They're in the middle by Denny Kamara, by Denny Avdia's improved play. They're by Tumani, by Don McClingan being able to hold down the fort, by Anthony Simons making 3 points. If this is the group that is going to cause the Blazers to be decent enough to not fail, you might as well root for them to win. Alia Akta est. The die is cast. Again, shout out to Chapel Hill Carborough Public Schools. I am recording this within walking distance of my elementary school. Let's go. Shout out to my Glenwood Gators. That's going to do it for today's pod. We will do more of these shows. In fact, one this week. I'm on vacation. I'm visiting my parents. I'm in North Carolina. I'm far away from my home, but I'm going to bring you 3 this week. The Blazers on Wednesday continue their road trip in Boston against the Celtics. Look for that show in your feeds on Thursday. The way this works, just because of my sort of living and situation, is I'm going to record them in the morning on the East Coast. So for my East Coast listeners, it'll come out a little later. But for my West Coast listeners, they'll still be in your feed. Not the same exact time, but a little similar for the YouTube feed, pretty much identical for the YouTube feed, but a little bit later for my audio listeners. So thanks for bearing with me. Week of vacation, 3 shows. I appreciate it. Come back, look for a show on Thursday after the Celtics game, and then I'll be back in town at the end of the week, and we will get back to 5 shows a week in perpetuity till freaking August. It's what we do! Wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.